and start the board meeting.
Thank you.
You said Ms. Shepherd's not going to be here for the meeting?
No, she's not. No, she won't be here.
Okay.
All right, Dr. Thornton, we're live now.
Thank you. Thank you. And good evening and welcome to the May 14th, 2020 meeting of the Prince George's County Board of Education. As usual, before we begin, I'd like to ask everyone to please turn off your wireless communication devices to avoid interfering with our meeting. I'd like to remind the community that you may observe our meeting. Lines are muted to avoid background noise. And the board meeting is being recorded and a video will be available to the public on our board web page. At this point, I would like to ask Board Member Ahmad to please lead us in the board's prayer and Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance, steer us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. Amen. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Ahmed. And Ms. Tate, would you now call the roll?
Sure. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Ms. Ahmed.
Here.
Ms. Boozer Struther.
Here.
Mr. Burrows.
Here.
Mr. Montero.
Here.
Mr. Murray.
Present.
Mr. Omolola.
Here.
Mrs. Queen.
Present.
Mrs. Shepherd. Mr. Swan.
Here.
Mr. Thomas.
Here.
Mr. Valentine.
Here.
Mr. Wallace.
Present.
Mrs. Williams.
Present.
And Dr. Thornton.
Present. Thank you, Ms. Tate. And I want to thank Ms. King and Ms. Tate and the staff, as usual, for making sure that our meeting is prepared for us. So thank you all very much. Colleagues, if you turn your attention now to the agenda for our May 14th meeting. Before I receive a motion to approve the agenda, I'd like to add an emergency item. That will be item 7 as an emergency item, and the title of it will be CIP Communication to the County Council. That's what we will discuss as item 7. With that amended agenda, a motion is in order to approve.
I make a motion to approve.
It's been properly moved and seconded by Ms. Queen as the maker of the motion, and Ms. Who seconded the motion? Mr. Thomas, right. Thank you. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposing, no. The ayes have it. Let the record reflect unanimous support, Ms. King. Colleagues, if you will now turn your attention to the minutes of our April 15th board work session, and I'll receive a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded by Mr. Burrows and Ms. Queen that the minutes of our April 15th board work session be approved unmodified. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposing, no. The ayes have it. And we'll now move to a report of the chair. Colleagues, let me say thank you in the presence of the public for the manner in which you as a board and individually as well as collectively is governing in this COVID-19 environment. Some of our work is behind the scenes, but I want the public to know how collaboratively and supportive that we are being of the work that's being done by our CEO, the excellent work, as well as our staff and our teachers. And on behalf of the board, I want to express a sincere appreciation to our teachers and our professional staff and support staff and the parents and the students who are really being very patient in this environment. We're acting as a village. It's very difficult, very complex. But I really, as chair of the board, want to thank you as board members for what you all are doing as a board, as well as individually in your own way to help us get through this very difficult situation. Having said that, we've had some very, very unfortunate deaths that are COVID-19 related. And I want to take this opportunity to ask for a moment of silence for at least 4 of them. One is Curtis Orr, who's the husband of Tamala Taylor Orr, assistant principal at the Samuel Ogle Middle School. Ruth Talentino, who's a teacher at the Bladensburg High School, who was a teacher. Delia Boyce, food service manager at the William H. Hall Academy. And finally, Tina Gibson, the sister of Tawana Davis, a grants technician, Office of Strategic Planning and Resource Management. Please join me in a moment of silence for each of these individuals. Thank you. And I would ask all of us to keep these families, please, in your thoughts and your prayers. I would ask the public to please check our website for information about future board meetings and all of the rich information that is on the board website. With that, Dr. Gosen will now turn the floor to you, and if you please give us your report.
Thank you and good evening. Last week, the state superintendent announced that all school buildings will remain closed for the rest of the school year, but distance learning will continue. We never could imagine that on the first day of school, we'd end up in this position, but I'm committed to ending the 2019-2020 school year proud and PGCPS strong. Distance learning will continue until June 8th, and then we will allow students to make up any work for the fourth quarter grading period during June 9th through the last day of school. We also have increased the number of meal sites from 43 to 49, and those meal sites will continue to serve. We're still working through many questions related to closing out this school year, and we will continue to provide updates to our Prince George's County Public School community as soon as it's possible and it's safe to do so, such as retrieving items from lockers and classrooms, returning textbooks, Chromebooks, and any other Prince George's County Public School property, and registration for new student programs and charter schools. Those tend to be the most popular emails that I get every day now. One bright spot as we approach the end of the school year is our system-wide virtual e-graduation celebration on May 30th in collaboration with ABC7. The e-graduation celebration will broadcast on May 30th at 7 p.m. on WJLA 24/7 News and rebroadcast the following day on ABC7 at noon. We will welcome back Oxon Hill High School's own from the class of 1988 Academy Award nominated actress Taraji P. Henson as our commencement speaker, along with other special guests like singer Kitty Lattimore, who was also one of our Hall of Fame inductees. Joe Claire, Taylor Thomas will serve as our MCs, and lots of other prominent alum. If you do not live in the area and want to watch the e-graduation online, WJLA or any of our social media handles, you can. And lastly, as a reminder, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. We'll be kicking off a new mental health webpage tomorrow that will provide resources on such topics as depression, grief, abuse, and neglect, and bullying. This concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gosen. We would normally have public physical presence on the part of the public to comment before the board, but instead of that, members of the public have submitted written comments to the board on the agenda items. Those comments will be posted on our board website and made available to board members. So we'd ask the public to continue to submit their written comments. Ms. Queen.
So, Dr. Thornton, I have a question for Dr. Gosen. Dr. Gosen, I know you said as soon as we get back, but I've had a couple of teachers, I guess some of them probably won't be returning, but they are concerned about getting some of their personal items from the school. I do know that we do have a limited, like at church, that maybe 10 people can go in at a time. Are we going to set up a schedule to let them even start going to doing that even in June, even if the order is not lifted, to be able to let them go in and start getting their personal items?
So what we'd like to do is first comply with the request that our county exec just issued today, which is for us to stay at home until June 1. It is my hope that this additional 2 weeks will help to ensure that everyone is safe, and then we can create a plan after June 1, which is while school is still in session, that will allow them to get their personal belongings.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Queen and Dr. Gosen. Colleagues, we will now move to the consent agenda. Dr. Gosen, would you please introduce item 4.1, which is the school calendar?
Yes, items 4.1 through 4.3 requires board approval of the revised 2019-2020 school calendar. and a workplace bullying policy and a behavior threat assessment policy. I probably should have
That'll be introduced by Ms. Ahmed.
Yep, I
Colleague,
realize that. So item 4.1.
yes, thank you. A motion is in order regarding the revisions to the 2019-20 calendar.
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded by Ms. Queen and Ms. Boozer-Struther, I think, to adopt the revisions to the 2019-20 calendar. Those in favor, Ms. Williams. Ms.
I
Williams.
just had a question. Is it time for questions?
Yes.
Okay. On the calendar, Dr. Golson, there are two dates related to report cards and progress reports. Can you give us a little bit more information why it says TBD?
So for progress reports, since we entered fourth quarter and are just doing a pass incomplete, we will not be issuing progress reports for fourth quarter. For report cards, we will mail report cards to all of our students and their families at the conclusion of fourth quarter. Once the date has been established, it's important to know, even in the calendar that you are going to vote on today, we made a note that we have still submitted a request for the state board to approve June 2nd as a school day, since that is now an election day and it will be done via paper. So we didn't want to issue that date knowing that we still might potentially have another last day, even after you all vote on this, that would be sooner than what it is.
So can you, I guess, before you publish this, make a note about the TBD. You have the TBD for third quarter report cards and fourth quarter progress reports. I think for clarity, if we go back to it in the future, it'll just be clear.
Got it. I sure will. I'll take care of that. Thank you for catching that.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. The vote is on the motion regarding the revision of our calendar for 2019-20. Those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposing, no. Let the record reflect, Ms. King, that is unanimous on the part of the board. At this point, I would ask my colleague, Ms. Ahmed, to please introduce item 4.2 and 4.3. And before doing so, Madam Chair, I want to thank you and the other members of the Policy and Governance Committee, Mr. Omolola, myself, and Mr. Thomas, and Ms. Boozer-Struther, who's the Vice Chair of the committee, for the work that you all are doing. Excellent work in helping to revise and update our policies. So if you'll introduce items 4.2 and 4.3, please.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Thornton. Colleagues, the Policy and Governance Committee met on April 14th, 2020, with all committee members in attendance, myself as committee chair, Ms. Boozer-Struther as vice chair, Dr. Thornton, Mr. Omolola, and Mr. Thomas. We all participated via conference call. During this meeting, we considered two policies that are now before you today. One is the attached workplace bullying policy. And this policy essentially establishes a framework for preventing, addressing, and correcting workplace bullying with processes to prevent, identify, report, investigate, and resolve instances of workplace bullying with corrective actions as needed. The other item that's before us today is the behavior threat assessment policy. And as required by law, the purpose of this policy is to establish and maintain a behavior threat assessment process that provides appropriate measures to identify, assess, and intervene when an individual's behavior may pose a threat to the safety of the school, students in the school or staff members in the workplace, and to protect and support potential victims, and to provide assistance as needed to the individuals being assessed, including positive interventions, restorative approaches, supports, and provide wraparound services involving school and community resources. I'll note that last piece around positive interventions and restorative approaches was very much at the forefront of our committee's discussion and was thoroughly addressed in the policy as it stands. After a robust discussion on these items, the committee voted unanimously to recommend to the full board that the policy be approved and be posted for public comment per policy 9340. This is in consent agenda because per that policy, if it's advanced by the board, the policy will be posted to the PGCPS webpage and publicized by the school district for community input for a period no shorter than 2 weeks. After the public comments are received, the committee will consider them and recommend any further revisions before recommending that the board approve the final version. So these two items that are in the consent agenda are essentially just our approval to be able to move forward for public comment on these two policies. Thank you, Dr. Thornton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And colleagues will now vote to authorize the posting of these two policies as being recommended by the committee. And I don't see any discussion. So those in favor, Ms. Williams. Ms. Williams.
I just have I'd just like to make a friendly amendment. I think these policies are very well written and cover a lot. My question for both, because this is something that has to do with interaction with our staff and with, I guess, negative implications of those interactions, I did not see a way for the administration to report back to us on incidences that occurred related to these things. For example, if there is workplace violence, we typically find out information after it comes, it escalates to a certain level. So I think it would be good for us to be informed on the number of incidents that happens, if it's happening at certain schools repeatedly or in certain offices repeatedly. I think it would be good for there to be a regular reporting mechanism for the administration to inform us, maybe once a quarter or twice a year, or something like that. That would be my request for in addition to both policies.
Dr. Chair, if I may.
You may.
I feel that because this is on behalf of the committee, I don't know that it can be accepted as an amendment unless it's discussed or moved as the committee. Does that make sense? So, a suggestion that I may have in moving forward is to ask that your request is recorded in the meeting minutes and that it's added to when this comes back to the committee for discussion. Is that
that's fine? That's fine. If it's a part of the discussion after comments come back from the community, I'm okay with that. I'm just thinking that that it should be added. I'm not asking that it be added before it goes out to the public, but when it comes back and you're reviewing it for the additions that the community has added, I think that we need to have that. And that is what I'm going to be looking for all policies, that if we're creating a policy, that it's not just that we check the box that we created a policy. We need to have some engagement with the administration to show that it's being implemented. And if there are things that happen, how do they interact and inform us of those actions?
Okay, Madam Chair, Ms. Ahmed, you're agreeing to make sure that our committee includes that in our deliberations once we get the response from the community.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, the vote is on the posting before the public of these two policies. Those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposing, no. Let the record reflect, Ms. King, that is unanimous. And thank you, Ms. Ahmed, for that. Colleagues, if we could move now to the budget consent agenda, and we will pull item 5.4 for separate discussion. Dr. Golson, if you'll introduce items 5.1 through 5.3.
Items 5.1 through 5.3 requires board approval of a memorandum of understanding with SEIU Local 400, the June 2020 expenditure requirements, and award of phase 1 construction contract for work at Cherokee Lane Elementary School.
Motion is in order regarding 5.1 and 5.3 to 5.3. Ms. Queen has introduced, moved it. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Williams. Ms. Williams.
I have questions on a few of the items. On the expenditure, on the projected expenditures for June 20, and I don't see Mr. Hertzberg on the call.
Let me do this, Ms. Williams. If there are no questions about 5.1 and 5.3, let's.
Well, I do have a question about 5.3.
Okay.
I do have a question about 5.3. The question about.
Let's do this so that we can do it in order. It looks like all of them are being pulled, so we will separate. We will vote on each one of them. Ms. Williams, please direct your comments to 5.1.
No questions for 5.1.
No questions. Though, if there are no questions on 5.1, all in favor of 5.1, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposing, no. Let the record reflect, Ms. King, that 5.1 passes unanimously. Now, Ms. Williams, your questions about 5.2.
My question about 5.2 is related to the projected amounts that we expect to spend in June. I was just interested in the projections. It seems quite in line with what we've done in 2019 and 2018. And I would think that there would be a more substantial reduction due to the fact that there is a number of operating expenditures that we did not have to use. For example, gas, substitutes and things like that. Even though I know we've spent more money with the COVID on other things, it just seems that the projections seem a little high to me. And so I was wondering, and maybe since Mr. Herzberg is not on the call tonight, maybe he can just send that information in a response, follow-up?
Yep, sure will. I wrote a note for sure.
Okay. And that's all I have for the 5.2.
Colleagues, the motion now is, the vote is on 5.2, expenditure requirements. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposing, no. Seeing no opposition, Ms. King, let the record reflect that it's unanimous. Ms. Williams, your comments regarding 5.3.
My comments regarding 5.3 are related to just some additional information on the contract award. I do support the contract award, but a few years ago, we made some clarification. I requested some clarification on all board action summaries related to construction contracts, just to set the record straight so that we can follow it in the future. And those items included, the board action summary should have included items such as when the contract was starting, their anticipated completion date, in reference to the CIP budget book. And so there are just some missing items, and CIP has that. If you need for me to share that with you, I can share that document with you.
Nope, we will make sure it gets included
Okay, thank you.
from henceforth.
Yeah, and
Dr. Golson, I actually think because this was a pilot, this is a different project than all the others. There might be some items that traditionally we normally approve included but are not included here. We can follow up with CIP to delineate that for you.
yeah, it really was just around the notice to proceed and the substantial completion dates, which are not included on this document. And I think it's important because we're supposed to track back when we do change orders and final payout with the initial award.
We'll also get that information and send it to our board members as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. King, we did have a motion to initially, we pulled 5.4, but we had a motion regarding 5.1 to 5.3. So those in favor of 5.3, which is the Cherokee Lane Elementary School Replacement Award, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposing, no. Let the record reflect that it's unanimous. And now 5.4, Ms. Ahmed.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. I wanted to thank administration for addressing a number of questions that I had brought forward regarding this item. As many of you know, one of my overcrowded elementary schools in my district is going to be a part of this comprehensive school boundary review. And so I have developed, with the support of members of the community, a task force that is a couple dozen strong that's looking at this. And so after having a meeting with them earlier this week, came across, developed some questions based upon notes from that meeting and discussions therefrom. And so the responses are noted there. The main thing that I wanted to mention and ask for some elaboration on is the community engagement component of this, especially given COVID-19 and the inability for folks to be able to meet in person for who knows how long. I just wanted to have a better sense from administration on what the community engagement piece of this boundary initiative will look like, since it'll affect so many of us in different communities.
Yes, so the selection of the company required that they will have the ability and capacity to offer input through telecommunications and virtual. That was one of the questions, and I thank you for asking that we provided a response to. We know that we will not have the opportunity immediately or even in the coming months to have large scale community input. But using the use of many of the platforms that we're using now through Zoom to have in-person virtual, and to use our teletown hall format as well to gather community input, as well as the traditional way, which is the ability for people to review on our webpage and then submit input via email to a designated email address will also be utilized to capture thoughts and feedback in those community forums.
Thank you, Dr. Goldson, and please know that my task force is available for any type of input. We have a lot of things to say.
No problem.
Thank you, Ms. Samet, and to the community that you represent for submitting those questions. Colleagues, those questions as well as the answers, comprehensive answers, are available to each of you, as well as to the public. Colleagues, a vote is now in order for 5-4. Those, Ms. Williams.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm trying to raise my hand.
That's fine. Please proceed.
I think that community involvement is very, very important, especially in times like we are living through now. I think it's even more important because of the stickiness that boundary changes make for the community, that we have board involvement in these discussions, including some of the meetings with the consultant. When I first got on the board, there was a recommendation by a consulting group that was very interesting. I didn't think that it would help our community, the recommendation that they made. And because I was new to the board, I don't know what occurred and how much the board was involved in the discussions. But I think that it is important when we make major changes to how the school system operates. For example, transportation or the building of new schools, the things that I've been involved in, we need to have board involvement to understand the evolution of the recommendation so that information can be shared with the board members. So when that recommendation is presented to the board, it is understood why a recommendation is being made that may not seem as logical as someone would see on the surface. And so if we could, and I'm willing to volunteer, but if we could have a representation throughout this process to come up with the recommendation that they will make at the end of their scope, I think that it would make for a better recommendation, and I think it would be more acceptable to have the board input throughout that conversation. So that is just my comment. And like I said, I'm willing to volunteer, but as I always say, is I encourage all them board members to participate when they can in these types of meetings with consultants, because it's important that we one, give our voice to it, but also we become aware of why decisions are being made and why recommendations are being made.
Thank you, Ms. Williams, and we'll take that under advisement with the board leadership, Dr. Golson, and get back to the board in terms of the best way.
No problem.
Make sure that the board has involvement. Colleagues, the vote is now on 5-4. In favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposing, no. There's no opposition, and the ayes have it. If we could now move to item 6.0, which is new business first reader. Dr. Golson, would you please introduce item 6.1? No, I will talk about item 6.1. That's the board's.
Correct.
Colleagues, thank you for reviewing the proposed board calendar. Thank you and the staff for developing it. We did get some feedback, and in response to the feedback, we're recommending 2 modifications to the calendar, which I think will help. We're recommending that we move our normally scheduled February board retreat to an August 21st the 22nd board retreat. That's important because, as Dr. Golson, as you now know, has embarked on a strategic planning process to revise the strategic plan for our school system. A board retreat at this time would obviously give the board a chance to give some great thinking to vision and mission revision and participate in that. So that's one recommendation. The second recommendation is to, I think that came in response to what several board members said, but certainly Mr. Mann, to move October 22nd, our meeting, to October 21st to avoid an early voting conflict. And if you would accommodate those two adjustments to the Board of Education calendar, I'd accept a motion for discussion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and seconded that the calendar for the board as adjusted in those.
Dr. Thornton, you have a question for Mr. Thomas.
Yeah, I was just getting the motion on the floor. It's been properly moved that the modified calendar be approved, and who wanted to speak?
Trying to move it.
Who wanted to speak? Anyone? Okay. Mr. Thomas. Mr. Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Thornton. I had a couple of questions. I do support those revisions as well, or I agree with those revisions. I had questions about two sets of meetings that are happening back-to-back weeks in the spring of 2021. Now, not that there's anything wrong with us having meetings in back-to-back weeks, but I think it's just typically the custom that we at least have a 2-week break in between. And so that's the final meeting of February being the last week of February and the beginning of March, as well as the final meeting of April and the beginning meeting of May. So I was wondering if there was any reason as to why I actually can infer those reasons based on looking at other events on the calendar. But I'm also curious as to, or rather I have suggestions as to how those can still be spaced out appropriately. And so would now be an appropriate time to suggest those, or?
What I would, Ms. King, you can help. If board members have additional changes that they would like to suggest to the calendar, I would suggest that we either approve this now with modified later or delay the approval until our next meeting. Ms. King, you have any comments?
Yes, this is actually for a first reader, so we can certainly take all the comments and
that's true. Yeah,
revise
that's true. That's true. Sorry about that. You're right. So, Mr. Thomas, if you would get those modification proposals to us.
Certainly.
The board members will certainly do that.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Ms. King.
Thank you. Thank you. So, colleagues, a vote is on 6-1 as a first reader, unmodified, with the exception of those two changes that I articulated. Those in favor of that, please say aye.
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 Those opposing, no. Let the record reflect, Ms. King, that the first reader for the calendar is approved unanimously. Dr. Golson, if you would now introduce item 6.2, which is Educational Facilities Master Plan updates.
Item 6.2 requires board approval of the Education Facilities Master Plan update as a first reader.
This is a first reader, colleagues, a motion is in order to move it as a first reader.
So moved.
It's been proper. Is there a second? Is there a second? Somebody raise their hand.
Second.
Second. It's been properly moved and seconded by Mr. Omolola, I think, and Ms. Williams, that the master plan be introduced as a first reader. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposing, no. I don't see any opposition, Ms. King, so let the record reflect that it is unanimous. Colleagues, the next item on the agenda is the added emergency item number 7.0 that we added to our agenda, which is CIP communication to the County Council. And I'm going to now introduce Mr. Murray to discuss it.
Thank you, Dr. Chair. Yeah, colleagues, so this is in relation to the proposed county budget for the upcoming year. As you all will remember, back this fall in our CIP discussions and vote, as a board, we were able to come together and compromise around requesting equal funding for High Point, which is number 6 on our CIP recommendations list, and the new Northern Area School, which falls at number 7, we requested equal funding for both of those projects, recognizing the important need to build both and to move forward on both. That was something I was really proud that the board was able to work together on. In the county's proposed budget for this upcoming year, there's $7 of the $8 million requested for the new Northern Area High School, but there's $0 in the budget for High Point High School in the upcoming year budget for planning. Colleagues, you know that High Point is one of our most diverse, one of our most deserving and needy schools in our county. The school is 98% minority, about 83% economically disadvantaged. It's a Title I high school with a graduation rate that's far below that of the county. It's a school that has been perpetually passed over by our county for a variety of reasons. And so tonight, in the interest of compromise, in the interest of not adding to the county's budget, I would like to urge the board and make a motion that the board send a letter to the county council and county executive asking for an equal split of the $7 million allocated for the new Northern Area High School in next year's budget for planning to be split $3.5 million and $3.5 million for High Point and the Northern Area High School, which reflects and lines up with what we previously voted on in the fall. Thank you.
Is that a motion, Mr. Murray?
Yes, Dr. Chair.
Is there a second for discussion?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Murray, seconded by Ms. Queen. Is there a need for discussion? There's seeing no need for discussion. Ms. Boozer-Struther.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate the sentiment, but I do have some questions about, one, there are other CIP budget items that were cut. So as a board, it seemed we'd want to support all of the projects. And the other is that to split this doesn't seem to be very productive, that the funds to move the process would be split. And I am not sure that that would fully benefit either project. So I do think we do need to deliberate over that reality. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Swan and then Ms. Williams. Mr. Swan.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to second that. I mean, just looking at the number of things that were cut, I don't think we should limit it to one particular school. I wasn't here when this was put forward in the fall, but the recommendation from this board was put there for a reason. So I believe if we're going to send anything, we should be comprehensive and complete, and not cherry pick because there's need, you know, that has been shown in what was submitted, and so that would be my comment.
Thank you, Ms. Williams, and then Ms. Queen.
I just wanted to add that the planning work, there are going to be a lot of items that need to get done. If we were to split the funding, at the end of the process, at the end of this calendar year, we would still have 2 projects undone versus having 1 project done. And so I don't know if it really logistically will be helping us in any kind of way to split the money and do half the work on both in the time frame allotted. But I also suggest that if we are asking for something, we ask for the entire CIP to be fully funded, not just selective.
Thank you, Ms. Queen, and then Ms. Shepherd.
Yes, I agree with you guys as far as asking for the fully amount, but I really want us to think about that. Think about High Point High School. I remember first coming on the board and us going to the school, and Mrs. Swan, unfortunately, wasn't there. And I remember going to the bathroom and washing my hands in a school that had rusty water, okay? So let's be realistic. That school needs to be a new school. Not only do a lot of our schools need to be a new school, as a board, our job, we were elected, and some of you guys were appointed, but you were elected and appointed to fight for what was needed. So we have to lobby it, and we have to go down to the county council, even in the middle of college. Then we need to do that as board members, okay? We need to stop saying what we cannot do. I understand the county council is trying to get what they can do, But we need to do what we need to do as elected and appointed board members and say, hey, we need this for our kids. We need to put our children first. We need this for our constituents. And we need to start reaching out to our constituents and say, hey, we need you guys to help also. But we got to start standing up and speaking out and letting them know that the tax dollars they get from the governor on is for our kids and for our school system.
Thank you, Ms. Queen. Ms. Shepherd, Mr. Burrows, and then Mr. Murray.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree that if we're going to ask for the funding, we want to have the full funding.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. Mr. Burrows.
Good evening, colleagues. I remember this was a very sort of contentious issue when the board voted last year. And the initial motion that was passed was to eliminate the new Northern Area High School and to fully fund High Point. That passed first reader. After that first reader vote, several colleagues were very concerned about it. Several county council members were concerned about it. I know Dr. Thornton and I met with the county council member I believe Mr. Rose was there. And as a board, we decided to not pit one community over the other and instead come together with a compromise. And that compromise was that we would send them both to the county and request the same amount. And that's essentially what we did. We sent High Point as priority 6, and we requested $8 million, and High Point received 0 money. The new Northern Area High School we sent as well with $8 million, and they received $7 million. And so what I believe Mr. Murray is saying is that this board was able to not pit one community against the other, but come to some sort of agreement. And in that same good faith, I would assume this letter would say, we want them both built. We ask that you would do what you could to advance both projects. And it just doesn't seem right to give $0 to High Point High School. You know, and that's essentially what it is. And it was a very contentious moment for that board, but ultimately the board came out unified. And I hope we could do that again today. I do want to distinguish these two issues from other CIP issues. And to say that, I'm sorry. So when we look at the new International High School in Langley Park, and we requested $0 for it. And that is number 9 on the list, right? And so the county kind of gave us what we asked for. We didn't ask for anything. I mean, this is really a case where we have a school that is number 6 on our priority list that got 0, and a school that's number 7 on our priority list that got $7 million. And so I would like to say fully fund the whole thing. I know we all would. We want everything funded. I would love to see schools on my district on this list. And I know you would all too. But I think the concern here is a narrow one, and that this board came to an agreement, a compromise. And I hope that we would share that thinking with the council members about advancing both projects at the same time.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Dr. Chair. What I heard out of the first round, several colleagues said, you know, if we fund both projects, we're going to slow down both projects. I think it's true that both would move a bit slower with the funding. We would like unlimited funding. I also heard those same colleagues say they would like to move one project forward instead of the other. That is why we have the CIP list that we did discuss so hotly in the fall. The list is very clear. It's ranked for a reason. High Point is number 6 on that list. I could have came with a motion tonight that said I want to strip the Northern Area High School of the $7 million and put the $7 million to High Point as it's higher on the list. There's no debate about that. And so my motion truly is an effort to meet halfway, and if anything, concede ground in the fact that High Point is the prioritized school of the two on the list of priorities. And so if we were going to move one forward, I think it's pretty clear we would move the one forward that's higher on the list. And in the interest of that spirit of compromise and keeping the ball rolling on a school that, again, has been passed over for decades because of arguments such as this one, my motion is simply one that's trying to meet in the middle ground and allocate High Point equal share and that which they have earned based on their priority rating on the list that this board voted on in the fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Ms. Ahmad and then Ms. Boozer-Struther.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. Mr. Burrows covered a lot of what I was seeing and feeling. I did want to mention one point to colleagues on the board that may be feeling some type of way about splitting the funding the split of the funding, and that is that there are projects that are higher on the list that were not fully funded, and the county still felt like, okay, let me list one. So there's we're talking about our top 10 priority list right now. And within the top 10, there's a project that's listed for as number 4 that we asked for $9.4 million. And what the county is giving us is $6 million. And so if you're worried about the split of funding, there are projects that are not receiving as much funding, but I'm sure that the $6 million going to that priority 4 school, I think that at least we're going to get somewhere with that, right? As opposed to with High Point, if we're not funding it at all, we're not going to get anywhere at all with that one. And it is such a high priority, I think, for so many of us on the board that we voted to compromise on this and build it in and bring it in. And so I just wanted to emphasize that there is, I think that we need to start moving somewhere with this. And just because even if it's not fully funded in the way that we want it, having some funding for it will, I think, help move this project forward and other priority projects on our list forward as well.
Thank you, Ms. Ahmad. Ms. Boozer-Struther and then Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. Just a couple points that I wanted to make is around the communities served that, both of these schools serve the same student body, an overcrowded student body of Northwestern High School, High Point, that new school is the same community. So it's not a split community, it's the same students. The other thing is what I want to clarify is we are not changing our vote. We came together for that vote. We are still together. The council in the budget process at the council level has changed the funding. So we are sending a letter. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that we aren't changing where we stand. The county budget cycle the recommendation has changed. So we are writing a letter, and that's why I say we stand with our request in full and not split it apart. Thank you.
Ms. Williams.
Thank you. I think Pam covered it. We want to stand for what we asked for. And I think that we asked for all of what we asked for because if you look at all of the money that we're asking for is not the same money. Planning money is different from construction money. It's different from design money. So if we're going to ask for something, I think we're trying to accomplish something and at least show that we're moving something, because at the end of this period, at the end of this, the use of this 7,000, whether it's 3.5 million or 7 million to go to one school, at the end of that funding, the question is, where are we going to be? If we only fund one school, we will be at the same place with that other school if we only funded it halfway. So what I'm saying is that we need to ask for all of the money that we're requesting for the CIP, not just cherry pick a school that's on there, because Flowers High School in their HVAC system is getting $0. So I think that like Ms. Boozer-Struther said, let's go and stand with what we asked for and ask for the entire funding to be granted to us.
Okay, colleagues, where we are, I have Mr. Omolola. Let me just explain where we are. We have a motion on the floor introduced by Mr. Murray and seconded, which would have the board writing a letter asking for equal division of funding support for Northern area as well as High Point. There is no substitute on the floor, so that's what we, after Mr. Omolola speaks, that's what we would vote on unless there's a substitute to achieve what board members have expressed. Mr. Omolola. And
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. Colleagues, I just wanted to give you some history about the student board members and their relationships with High Point High School. The last two student board members, Manya Page and Jawan Blocker, when they sat on the board with Mr. Murray and Mr. Burrows, High Point has always been a contentious issue, and they've always wanted to rebuild High Point. And every time we've got close or around the issue of High Point, something has always come up that has stopped us from making progress on it. And I know that we would all want to see a fully funded budget for High Point, but this compromise that Mr. Murray is offering today is really to give the best of both worlds to both projects. We do know that sometimes building schools and creating the architecture for them is slow. We've seen that over and over again. And I know when I visited High Point and the students that I talked to, when we tell them that they're getting a new school, when we tell them that we're in the process of getting them a new school, it's something of joy to them. Because if you know anything about High Point students, they take a lot of pride in where they're from. And I think it's important to those students, and it's important to me that we do our best and that we realize that this is about politics. This is about students and about a community that is weighted and has been overlooked decades and decades at times for a new school. So I will urge you to support Mr. Murray's motion to make sure that we can support High Point and its community.
And I'm going to call on Mr. Valentine and then Ms. Shepherd. Let me ask a question to Mr. Murray before I call on Mr. Valentine. This is not a substitute motion, because as chair, I don't normally make motions, but is it possible to accomplish both the objective you have as well as what other board members are saying? That is, in the strongest of terms, the board would reiterate its request to the council to fund its CIP proposal, all of it. If the council decides, if for an event it does not do that, then the division that you recommended would be supported by the board. That's one can achieve both objectives, but I'll go to Mr. Valentine. You can chew on that, Mr. Murray. Mr. Valentine.
Thank you. And I appreciate my colleagues in their comments. And it seemed like we have a lot more in common than I think those who are watching would see, particularly the passion that Board Member Queen has towards really advocating to our county council and to our state representatives on the urgent need to fund our CIP. Everyone on this call is directly impacted by this. And we all have our own stories. You know, I have my own. And this has been something that we've been dealing with for a very, very long time. The amount of schools in our district that have come to disrepair are really a byproduct of when these schools were built in an era where we were really going to expanding public education in this country. My children go to a school that was built before my mother was even born. And so this year, my children had to share a school because another school down the road was literally condemned because it was under such disrepair. And so obviously this is very important. At the same time, I understand firsthand the overcrowding in the North. As you all know very publicly, my wife is a principal of the largest middle school in this county. And she has, I don't know, 10, 20, I don't know how many temporaries in her parking lot because Greenbelt Middle School is busting at the seams, as are every other middle school in the northern part of our county. And so again, what we all agree on, I would say, is we need to ensure that the students in the northern part of the county have somewhere to go to school that is safe, and that is up to the standard of what any of us would want our children to go to school in. At the same time, you know, I understand as a board member, as an at-large board member, I'm here to ensure that the entire district is represented. And so I'll be opposing this on the merits of the letter, but I will join with any board member who would want to really advocate to our county council and to our state legislators that we need to fully fund our CIP.
Ms. Shepherd, and then we can hopefully vote, colleagues. Ms. Shepherd.
Yeah, I think that you articulated the fact that there's an overcrowding issue in the north area. And I think that I just want to make sure that we understand that the other school that they're putting all the funding to is also going to be serving the community. As you know, people in Langley Park and the Delphi Road by New Hampshire and near DC, those are the people that come all the way to Beltsville to go to High Point in order for them to, access a high school. So High Point is dearing to my heart because I literally can walk down there. That's where my daughter graduated, and that's where my children will be going. And so I do, personally, I want a new school, but I also understand that there's the overcrowding issue, and that there is, if we bring another school, at least I feel like, or I have hopes that will help a little bit of the overcrowding issue that we have in the northern area. So I did want to point out that even though if that other schools get built, we're still going to be serving the same population of students that go to High Point. But I did wanted to make sure that I highlight that. And I will want that if we do write a letter, that we write something that we want all the schools that we have planned before for them to get built, not just pick one or the other one, because they all were important to us.
Thank you. And I see one more speaker, and then we can vote. Ms. Queen. And Ms.
And I just want my colleagues to understand, I understand what all of you saying, but I just want you to think back to what's going on at Wise and Flowers. When we built that new school for this area, then everybody started sending their kids from Central, and they started overcrowding them schools. And so it's not about that it's going to serve the same people. What it's about is it's not going to be equal equity-wise, because what's going to happen is some kids going to have a new school with new gadgets and new everything, new whiteboards, and other kids are still going to be having old stuff. And it's not fair equality, and that has been done years to us. And when you think about the people who live in the community like I have, because I'm born and raised here, forever paid my tax dollars, my kids deserve the best school in every part of this county. And what happened is my kids got stuck at Central while other kids got new schools. It is not fair that has happened to people, and we have to stop doing that and stop letting it happen to our kids like that when stuff like that happen. So that's what my fight is for, to make sure that High Point, the residents and the people in High Point get what they need and what they deserve to have. So it's very important.
Ms. King, there is some feedback noise. If you could check on that. And I'll call on Ms. Samet.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. Colleagues, I think this is real Rahila talking. The way I see it, we submitted our request of what we wanted, exactly the way we wanted it, to the county. And the county took it and they said, we're not going to give you that in the form of this proposal. And so for me, the way that I'm thinking is that, can we present something that's amenable to us that may also be amenable to them, so we can reach some type of a middle ground? Because to me, the way that it stands, it doesn't seem like we're going to get what we want, because we already asked for it and we didn't, and it's not in the proposal. So I just wanted to put that out there as food for thought as you all make your votes on this matter.
Mr. Swan.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, and I agree with you, Ms. Ahmed. I think, though, to cherry pick one item over the other items that are on here that didn't get the funding, I mean, that we asked for, then maybe we should be looking at a letter to say, all right, if you're going to give us $46 million, this is how we would like to get it, versus looking at one particular item, because there may be very significant things in priority 3, priority 4. Again, I wasn't here when this happened, but priority 5 didn't have any money, any money to it, and that's higher, than priority 6 and priority 7. For whatever reason, this list was put together, and so either we're gonna, in my opinion, stick to what the board at that time said that was what the priorities were, or are we saying we're going to create a new priority? And if we're going to create a new priority, then I think that's a much bigger conversation that doesn't, that I don't think we're going to be able to solve tonight to get in a letter to the county council. And so, I think we really should ask for it all because we need it all.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. Colleagues, the motion is on the floor unmodified, and that's what we are about to vote on, which is to send a letter to the council from the board requesting the equal division of the CIP funding for the northern area as well as High Point. That would be the letter. Ms. Tate, would you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Ms. Ahmed?
Aye.
Ms. Boozer Struther?
No.
Mr. Burrows?
Aye.
Mr. Montero?
No.
Mr. Murray?
Aye.
Mr. Omolola, I'm sorry, Ms. Queen?
Aye, that's going to vote.
Mrs. Shepherd?
No.
Mr. Swan?
No.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Valentine?
No.
Mr. Wallace?
No.
Mrs. Williams?
No.
Dr. Thornton?
No.
Five yes and no, I'm sorry, 8 no's.
Thank you. Is there any substitute motion that anyone wants to make that would achieve some of the objectives that?
You can call on me, Dr. Thornton.
Yes.
I make a substitute motion that we send a letter to the county council requesting that they fully fund the required budget that we actually need so we can move forward. So Prince George's County Public Schools can succeed and our children can have the best schools that's possible.
Is there a second of the motion?
Second. Second.
Been properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion of that? Mr. Burrows, did I see your hand?
Yeah. I would just ask that Ms. Queen, if you could include in your motion to explain the rationale around the agreement. I mean, the board, we were in a full month-long debate between a High Point and the new Northern Area High School issue. I would just like to provide them some context about why the board decided to do what we did in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. And Ms. King, we'll work with, well, let me see if this passes, first of all. Seeing no other discussion, those in favor of this, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it unanimously. Ms. King, let the record reflect that. Ms. King, you and I, working with Dr. Gossen's staff, will draft the letter, including the comment that Mr. Burrows just made, and we'll share it with the board before we send it. But it's an action, Ms. King, that we need to get to work on right now. Thank you, colleagues, for that rich discussion. I would say this in response to this. This is why I've been so deeply troubled by some of the actions taking place at the state level that's preventing the movement regarding Build to Learn. Because the frustration that you're hearing from board members reflecting the frustration of the people regarding aging schools and the absence of adequate facilities for our children is a result of processes at that level where we do not have statewide financing of building schools for our children. Now, the legislature passed the Build to Learn law, and it's caught up now in the vetoing of, I don't want to get political here, but the frustration you're hearing from these 14 board members with limited power to influence anything that we're talking about, that process has to be unplugged. Now, it's frustrating for me as a board member to have to sit here and hear my colleagues be drained because of something that we cannot really control. And so we have to ask leaders above us to stop the playing around about the need to build schools for our children. Because when it gets down to us, it gets very frustrating. You got to choose High Point versus Northwestern. You got to choose Flowers versus Central. That's very frustrating. And let's unclog it and pass and fund the Build to Learn law, build schools for our children. It's connected to the blueprint. And that's the integrated consensus that we need to be able to operate in. I think it passed. Is that right? The motion passed. Is that right? So Ms. King, we'll get that out and we'll draft that, colleagues, get it back out to you all so you know what we're writing. Colleague, we'll move now to 8.1, the motion to approve actions in executive session. Remember from our last work session, which we did not conclude, and that is a report from the CEO regarding the administration of the school system personnel matters, investigative proceedings regarding an internal audit, appeals to receive legal advice and appeals. All in favor of that, please say aye.
Aye.
Well, let me get a first so that you can, would someone introduce the motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Some properly moved and seconded that the actions we took in executive session on April 15th be approved. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
No, let the record reflect, Ms. King, that it's unanimous. Colleagues, now a motion to approve the items that we discussed in executive session tonight, which was a report from our CEO regarding administration of school system and personnel matters, investigative proceedings and internal audit, and appeals to receive legal advice about appeals and discuss pending litigation.
So moved.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve, Ms. Queen seconds. We approve executive session items from this evening. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposing, no. The ayes have it. The motion is now in order to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Seconded that we adjourn to meetings. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposing, no. The ayes have it. Thank you, colleagues, for an excellent meeting. Be safe out there. Wear the mask. 10 feet distance.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gosen. Bye-bye. Bye.